All right. I think it's time. I'm shutting myself in. I have my coffee with Boba Fett. He shot first. Not Boba Fett. Han did. Apparently we're building our audience. Hello, audience. Cheers to everyone who's shown up. It's been a long time. I'm a little nervous. I got my first heart. Terry. I hurt you back. So how are we doing tonight? We've got a good show for our first one back. We're going to be reading to you from Mr. Scott Meyer's The Authorities. I'm setting up our recording session right now so we can actually record what we do, if for no other reason than posterity. Hello, Beekeeper. Hello, David. Hi, Rocky. Hi, Carla. Good to see you guys again. I hope you had a happy new year and everybody's doing well. I'm a little late. Sorry. I'm a little tired, as you can tell. Look at that. Whew. Been recording all day, trying to at least. But I've got coffee. I'm supposed to do another live broadcast for a podcast at midnight tonight. So I'm going to be keeping it going all night long. That's why the coffee. Hey, Scott Meyer has joined us. Hello, Scott. Thank you for coming. Thank you for writing this amazing story that we're going to read from. I do record at home, and then it gets sent off to proofers and things like that. I'm my own director for the most part. Thank you, Valerie. I appreciate that. She says she loves my work. Hey, from northern Wisconsin, huh? Hello to you, Jesse. Justin, woohoo! You can all watch me guzzle coffee so I can get up the energy to do this awesome book. The beard is back. Sup, bro? From Crispin S. Hildebrand. I've been recording a book where I have to do the Hawaiian dialect. And a lot of like pidgin. And it's really hard as a white guy to do that and not sound like a total, I want to say douchebag, but we're after what time? 8 o'clock? We're good. Hello from Asheville, North Carolina. 10 comments so far. It gives me little boosts of confidence, Facebook does. It just said, conversation starter, exclamation point. 10 comments so far. The whole house of Meyer is here. I bet that's a big house of cards. I bet he appreciates that one. So, let's get going. I'm going to pull up my script on my iPad here. So for those who don't know or are just joining, hello. Thank you for coming back. I'm going to read to you from a wonderful book called The Authorities by Mr. Scott Meyer, who is quite the debutante, let me tell you. But I love reading his stuff, and I'm happy to be able to read it to you guys. So I want to dive right in with the first chapter. I can answer a couple questions. Hey, Austin, how the hell are you? Glad to see you. 25 comments so far, conversation starter. Jim's joined. Hello, Jim. It's good to be back doing these events. It's been a long time. Long time. What, few months as I tried to get my way through the holidays. All right, one more sip. Scotty! He's the belle of the cotillion. He is a debutante. Daniel, how are you? And Dom. Wonderful, wonderful. All right. I'm going to put on the magical headphones. You know what that means. It's time to get real. Everybody's here to hear me read, not flap my jaws about lame old me. All right. I'm going to turn on my mic. Check, check, check. All right. May the force, the caffeine force be with me. Yeah, isn't that awesome? My brother got me that. Boba Fett. Kristen says she can never find these videos when they're getting started. Trick? Yes. I like to try to seep it into people's subconscious. Thank you, RJ. I appreciate the comment on the beard. Scott is here. Bow to the awesomeness that is one of his 4 fave authors. Yes, Austin, he's here. He is here. No new news about Magic 2.0 at the moment, but I hope to have something on that to say soon. In the meantime, segue, let's read 1. Officer Rutherford looked forward to the day that he would finally get used to seeing dead bodies. He had a 5-year plan, a rather detailed one, which he had laid out before applying to become a police officer. The first line of the plan said, "Join the Seattle Police Department." The last line was, "Become a plainclothes detective." None of the many bullet points in between said anything about getting used to dead bodies. He now realized that was an oversight. Of course, he thought, if I had listed all of the unpleasant things I would need to get used to, the plan would have been 3 times longer. He adjusted his gun belt, which he was also not yet used to, even after a year on the job. The belt had seemed like any other belt to him, right up until the first time he actually had to put one on. He discovered that it was too large to go through any belt loop ever made, which was fine because it wasn't designed to keep your pants up. For that, you needed a normal belt. Wearing 2 belts at once seemed inelegant to him, and he said so to his instructor at the academy, who agreed with him, but only because he'd misunderstood Rutherford's point. The instructor went on to explain that the gun belt could slide around the body, becoming misaligned with the officer's pelvis, making it more difficult to draw one's weapon. To prevent this, the gun belt is fastened to the trouser belt with small straps made of leather or nylon, locking them together. The instructor called them belt keepers, but Rutherford recognized them for what they were. Tiny little belts that belted the big belt to the smaller belt. I got through that. Hi, Michelle. Scott Meyer's a boss. Yes, he is. Meyer and Luke equals sales from Doug Snowden. Let's hope so, Doug. Sales are a good thing. Emily's on. Another famous and awesome narrator in her own right, Miss Emily Beresford. Emily Beresford, thank you for joining us. You guys should all go look up her work. She's another Michigander, awesome narrator and basic human being. She's basic human being. So what's next? I gotta go on, don't I? Okay, the belt. Sorry, I got distracted. I was excited that Emily's on. All right. Of course, let's see. The big belt is belted to the smaller belt. Rutherford adjusted all of his belts again. Shouldn't be surprised, he thought. Dad always said that when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. They went to a belt maker, asking him to fix a belt problem. Of course, his answer was more belts. He was also struck by the bitter irony that while he had an overabundance of belts around his waist, he was required to wear a clip-on tie. The rationale was that in a fight, if some dude who was resisting arrest grabbed you by your standard necktie, he effectively had you on a leash. If he grabbed you by your clip-on tie, it would come off in his hand. You would be free to defend yourself, and your assailant would be paralyzed with laughter. Rutherford sometimes wondered if there was any record of an officer being whipped about the face with his own clip-on tie, but it seemed inadvisable to ask. Rutherford's goal from day one had been to become a detective, and the overabundance of belts only strengthened his resolve. Plainclothes officers were still supposed to wear either clip-on ties or breakaway ties, which tore off of a... Oh, I lost it. Mistake. We still here? Oh, they're all going to stop badgering Scott about the date. He'll write it in his good time. People. I have to rally the troops. They're ravenous, Scott. They just want it. They want your writing. You've created like a Walking Dead zombie horde of fans, and it's awesome. All right. Plainclothes officers were still supposed to wear either clip-on ties or breakaway ties, which tore off of an officer's neck with a light tug and the slapstick sound of tearing Velcro, and were thus even more efficient at turning an attempted assault into an unexpected moment of physical comedy. But at least plainclothes officers got to carry their weapon in a simple paddle holster that clipped on to a single, relatively normal belt. That seemed much more civilized to Rutherford. He looked at his surroundings and realized that if what he wanted was a more civilized existence, perhaps becoming a cop had been a poor choice. Rutherford was working in the seedy part of the University District, a few blocks back from Frat Row. He was maintaining the perimeter at a crime scene in a dilapidated Victorian house that had been converted into a boarding house for broke students by a determined individual who wasn't willing to let zoning laws, building codes, or public safety get in the way of making a profit. Rutherford stood in the hallway trying to exude authority. It was not easy. The house naturally drained the dignity from anyone who came inside. Even the mildew seemed embarrassed to be seen there. Because he was the lowest rocking? He's the highest rocking. Because he was the lowest ranking officer present, Rutherford stood in front of the door of the worst room in the house. Perhaps it had not been the worst room before, but it currently had a murder victim in it, so Rutherford was pretty sure it had earned that title now. The victim appeared to be a college-aged male, and the room showed signs of a violent struggle. The body had been discovered by one of the other tenants, who had noticed through the closed door that the victim was splayed on the floor next to the bed. This sounded fishy at first, but the story was made more plausible by the fact that the door had no knob, only a gaping hole where one could be installed at the tenant's expense. Also, the odor had likely drawn some attention. It certainly had Rutherford's, since he had been ordered to stand right next to the door and make sure that none of the other tenants disturbed the crime scene. The residents were all outside now. His fellow officers had herded a great many freaked-out college students onto the lawn. But nobody had returned to tell Rutherford that he didn't have to babysit the corpse any longer, so there he stood. Rutherford tried to distract himself from the odor. He thought about how he would describe the smell later. Imagine how your hands would smell if you bought 50 pounds of past due date ground beef and paid for it entirely with pennies. Rutherford thought that captured it pretty well. He also thought that trying to distract himself from the odor by describing it in detail had been a stupid idea. He adjusted his belts again. He heard the sound of the front door opening and closing, followed by the sound of approaching footsteps. Rutherford hoped that he'd get permission to leave his post, or at least pleasant company to distract him from it. But those hopes were dashed when Detectives Stoker and Voles came around the corner. Seattle was a big city, and the Seattle Police Department had a lot of detectives. Some of them were pleasant to work with. Some were less so. Most were more pleasant than Stoker and Voles. They were sloppy, both professionally and personally. Rutherford might have described them as scuzzy, but that would be an insult to scuzz, and he didn't even know what scuzz was. Sorry, I cracked myself up with that. It sounds like what scuzz was. Sounds like a children's book. These guys are pretty good. How we doing over here? Am I still? Okay. Stoker's suit looked as if he'd slept in it. His hair looked like he'd styled it hastily after sleeping on it. His coat looked like it had recently been wadded up, possibly for use as a pillow. Despite all this, Stoker looked as if he hadn't slept in quite a while. Voles was shorter, heavier, and looked like he slept just fine. Indeed, his slow movements and drooping eyelids gave the impression that Stoker had probably had to wake him when their car arrived at the crime scene. Of course, the thing that really bothered Rutherford was that they had the job he wanted, and they weren't even bothering to do it well. They smiled at Rutherford. Both men had mastered the art of making a smile feel like both a threat and an insult. Rutherford knew them, and of course they both knew him. One of the bullet points on the 5-year plan was, "Find a detective to be my mentor." Rutherford had set about this task using the same methods he'd employed to make friends in school, being eager and asking lots of questions. It hadn't worked in school, but he'd hoped it would be a better strategy for a 26-year-old man living in the real world. He'd been horrified to discover that while being a cop was as real as the world could get, it was alarmingly similar to being in school. It didn't help that even though he was obviously an adult, he was treated like a kid by most of his fellow cops. His curiosity and enthusiasm were often misconstrued as peskiness. His small physical stature and thin frame didn't improve matters. Sure, he was large enough to join the force, but so were all of the other cops, most of them by a substantially larger margin than he was. "Hey, look who it is," Stoker said. Voles spread his arms wide in a mocking gesture of delight. "Officer Sinclair, the future detective." "Detective Voles?" Rutherford said. "Detective Stoker, you both know that my last name is Rutherford." He knew that by correcting them he was giving them what they wanted, but he also knew that to not correct them would have the same effect. The only way he could win was to endure, eventually become a detective, then be better than them, better at the job, better dressed, and better company, none of which would be difficult. Stoker furrowed his brow and shook his head. No, I thought your name was Sinclair." "My first name is Sinclair. My last name, as you know, is Rutherford." Voles said, "But Sinclair is a last name. Why would your parents give you two last names?" Stoker said, "I think I get it. His parents were idiots." "I am named after my father's favorite writer," Rutherford said through clenched teeth. "Sinclair Lewis." "So there's one other guy in history with the first name of Sinclair. That doesn't mean it's not a stupid first name." "Actually, Sinclair was his middle name," Rutherford said, regretting it the instant the words left his mouth. "Which brings us back to the theory that your old man was a dummy," Voles said. "Look, Sinclair, I'm sure it's a nice distraction for you to stand here and tell us your family history, but we have police work to do." He pointed at the door behind Rutherford. "The stiff's in there?" Rutherford stepped aside and started to recite the details of how the body had been found. Stoker waved him off. "Inman told me all that outside. All we need you to do is shut up and stay out of our way." "Done," Rutherford said. "I'll just go and—" "No," Stoker interrupted. "You'll stay right here at your post in the hall, where you belong. Just stay quiet and let the grown-ups do their jobs. Maybe if you listen really close, you might learn something." Stoker and Voles gave Rutherford the stink eye as they walked into the crime scene. The scene of the crime, I said it wrong. Checking in. "Hey, Viviana, the Enchantress of Books. Awesome. She's on. I think I'm doing a blog with you at some point, Viviana. Please don't retire at 400 books. If I retired at 400 books, I'd already be retired. But 500? All right. He turned to watch them. As much as he hated to admit it, this was a chance to learn from them. Today's lesson wasn't how to close a door in a younger officer's face, then laugh about it with your partner. Rutherford turned his back to the door and listened. It was a cheap hollow core door, and the sound went through it like it was tissue paper. The large hole where the doorknob should have been only made it easier for noises to come through. "Okay," Stoker said, mechanically, reading from his notebook. "Meet Christopher Swanson. At least that's the name we were given. We were also told that he's a student at the University of Washington, like everyone else who lives in this dump. Major, unknown. Discovered at approximately 06:45 hours by another tenant who stopped by so they could go grab some breakfast before class. Upon finding the body and determining that Swanson was deceased, he called the police and alerted the landlord. No known enemies. Some of the other tenants who had been questioned say they heard a brief commotion around 2300 last night, but nothing they found alarming. Officer Inman was first to the scene. He went in, confirmed that the victim was dead and that it was probably not accidental, then established a perimeter and called us in. There was a brief silence. Then Voles said, "No computer. Kid's a student. He'd have a computer. Maybe the killer stole it." "Nah," Stoker said. "We know about that. The landlord took it before the first responders arrived. Planned to hock it to recoup the rent he's not going to get paid. And we've already confiscated it." Voles exhaled heavily. "Okay. There's not a lot of blood, considering. What there is came from the nose and ear. Forensics haven't been here yet, but looking at the body, I'd say from the bruises that someone beat this guy to death with his bare hands." Stoker asked, "What makes you say that?" "Look for yourself. Tell me that bruise doesn't look like a fist." Rutherford closed his eyes and tried to picture the bruises. He hadn't actually seen much of the body, standing on the opposite side of the door from it, and the odor hadn't yielded many clues. "You can even pick out the individual fingers, and the thumb," Voles said. "That's obviously a fist." "Yeah," Stoker agreed. "But it's really weird. For the fist to hit him at that angle, the killer can't have thrown a real punch. My guess is that he swung his arm like, I don't know, a bear paw or something." Rutherford tried to picture this, and couldn't. He even made a fist, then swiped it palm first through the air in front of him. He couldn't imagine any person strong enough to kill someone with such a blow. "And whoever the guy was, he made a fist weird, too," Stoker said. There was a silence while the two detectives thought about it. Then Voles said, "Well, he don't know how to hit a guy right. Why would he know how to make a fist right?" Stoker said, "True. Still, he did the job well enough on this poor sap." Rutherford heard a muffled rendition of the iPhone default ringtone. Stoker said, "That's me," then grumbled as he dug his phone out of his pocket. Stoker, "Yes, sir, we're at the scene now." "No, sir." Sir, is that really—" "No, sir, I understand, sir. Yes, sir." There was a heavy silence. Then Stoker said, "Come on." The door behind Rutherford opened, and Stoker emerged, trailed by a confused-looking Voles. "Sarge says we're to clear and guard the scene," Stoker explained to Voles, as if Rutherford wasn't even there. "We gotta make sure nobody comes in or out of here, not even forensics, until after Cap's people have had the run of the place." Voles and Rutherford both said, "Cap's people?" Rutherford said it with excitement. Voles did not. "Yeah, that's right," Stoker said. "It's your lucky day, Sinclair. The circus is coming to town. Anyway, we're to keep the crime scene pristine for them. Voles and I'll wait at the end of the hall. Sinclair, you just go ahead and stay here. You've been doing such a good job of standing around doing nothing, I'd hate to stop you now." Stoker and Voles retreated to the end of the hall and came to a halt before it emptied into the house's front room. They were only 20 feet away, so there was no way to keep Rutherford from hearing them talk, but it was clear to Rutherford that he was not included in the conversation. "Yeah," Stoker muttered. "Captain Weinhardt is running over. He told the sergeant that he wants to be here to meet them. If he doesn't make it, we're to cooperate, but not enthusiastically. That's what he said." The detectives were deeply annoyed. Rutherford was ecstatic, partly because he had heard lots of things about Cap's people, and this was his first chance to actually see them work, but mostly because the detectives were annoyed. Rutherford usually didn't take pleasure in other people's unhappiness, but life was serving Stoker and Voles's unhappiness to him on a silver platter. He felt it would be rude not to accept. End of the chapter! Do we still have people? Hey! I kind of got lost in there. I've missed the live readings too. That's because Scott's writing's so good. I could just read and read and read. I thought I was recording for a minute. Well, I was, but like for real. This is our first live reading together, Doug. Hi, everybody. Hearts, 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 hearts. Hi, Jean. Hi, Amy. Whew. I got into that. Hi, Jasmine. What's up? How are you? So what's been going on? Your beekeepers meeting ended early, so you're here now. I thought that was so funny, Jewel, that you have a beekeepers meeting tonight, of all things, and the fact that you're a beekeeper. You're having fun. Good, John. So, Jasmine! Jasmine's my good old buddy. Everyone say hi, Jasmine. I have one other to read for you before I get too tired and we cut this off. Thanks, David, for stopping by. You get lost in books too, Rebecca? Yeah, that's their beauty. All right, let me go to the next section, which would be about Derek Sambuchi. All right, so this is a little ways into the book, so I don't really want to give much away, so it's a little shorter. It's not a whole chapter. It's kind of a snippet. Excuse me. So, but we have the team together, and it's pretty self-explanatory, but they're going after a suspect, Derek Sambuchi, and the team includes our main character and some other interesting characters who all have specific skills in the team, as you'll see. All right, so I'm going to jump right in here. This is from The Authorities by Scott Meyer. Thank you for the congrats, Dana. I'm very excited about the Audi nom. It's going to be cool. All right. I think I want to go right here. Okay. Rutherford found Sloane and Max's conversation oddly soothing. If they were calm enough to bicker about Ralph Nader, the drive couldn't really have been that bad. He took slow breaths and watched the wisps of fake cigar smoke vent from his nostrils, waiting for his heart rate to drop to a more manageable level. From the back of the van, Professor Sherwood said, "Happily, none of those violent starts damaged the hive." Rutherford, Sloane, and Max all turned in unison to see Professor Sherwood, who was hunched over in the far corner of his seat. There was a cabinet built into the rear passenger side of the van. It was made of a light-colored wood that had been aggressively sanded, strategically scorched, and coated with a layer of glossy shellac almost a centimeter thick. The professor had one of the cabinet's doors open and was peering inside. Sherwood said, "I'd worried that the jostling might have broken one of the combs, but they're completely intact." "Hive?" Rutherford said. "I thought that was for storage equipment or something. I "I assumed it was a wet bar," Sloane said. Oh, just so you know, if you don't, Sloane speaks through a automated machine. "A van like this begs for a wet bar." "Part of it is," Sherwood said. "Storage, I mean. But back here at the very end, there's a small hive." Now that the cabinet door was open, and he wasn't concentrating on piloting a van-sized steam rocket, Rutherford could hear a faint buzzing. He craned his neck to see, and while the light, angle, and distance all worked against him, he could just make out a sheet of transparent material behind the door Professor Sherwood was holding open. Behind that, there was a moving pattern that looked like a yellow and black rendering of static on an analog TV. How many bees are in there? Max asked, voicing the question all of them were probably thinking. Oh, it's just a small hive. It's nothing compared to the ones I keep on the roof deck back at the office, Professor Sherwood said. Only 10,000 or so. Or so? Max, I'm sure even in Holland you know about the birds and the bees. Max said, In Amsterdam, very much so. Professor Sherwood smiled. Indeed, yes. Very good. But anyway, it's hard to know exactly how many bees there are, since the hive's population will fluctuate as bees die and reproduce. Is it safe to drive that thing around? Rutherford asked. Certainly. Beehives are transported on flatbed trucks all the time for agricultural purposes. It doesn't harm the bees in the slightest. Sloane's clipped, computer-generated voice said, I'm pretty sure he meant, is it safe for us? Oh, yes, I see. Yes, it's safe. The bees are sealed in a reinforced metal casing that's impact-resistant, in addition to being heavily soundproofed. There's a system that circulates air in and out so the bees can breathe, but it vents to the outside of the van. If we got into an accident violent enough to rupture the container, the bees would be the last of our worries. Or the last thing we ever worry about, Rutherford thought. And even if the bees did somehow get inside the van with us, Professor Sherwood said, they would only really pose a threat if they were upset. And as it happens, smoke calms them down. Positioned as they are near the rear tires, they're probably the only ones in the van who find Mr. Rutherford's driving relaxing. The team walked into the mini-mart. It was the first environment Rutherford had visited with the team where his clothes made him look right at home. Max and Professor Sherwood were the ones who looked out of place. Sloane stood out everywhere she went, but less so here because, aside from her cane, she could have ridden in on a Vespa. A man who looked to be in his mid to late 40s was standing behind the cash register. A tall, beefy man in poor physical condition, he was the human equivalent of a rusted-out Cadillac with a couple of bad pistons and a shot suspension. There was a single customer at the check stand, and the cashier's hands were scanning barcodes, doling out change and stuffing items into limp plastic bags. The cashier's mouth, however, was having a loud argument with a much younger, much smaller man of indeterminate Middle Eastern descent, who was busy loading food items that were essentially cold beige tubes onto a cooking apparatus that was essentially a rack of hot silver tubes. No, the younger man said. I'm sorry, no. It is something we cannot do. Don't be stupid, the cashier said. It only touched the floor for a second. No, I had to throw it out. Derek, we must respect the customer. And you don't serve something dirty to someone you respect. Is the floor clean? Is it? Yes or no? Is the floor clean? If you go to Jenny with your story about me trying to serve dirty food, you'll be telling her that you either wasted a perfectly good taquito or you didn't do a good job mopping. The customer whose items were being bagged didn't seem particularly alarmed by the conversation, possibly because he wasn't buying any taquitos, or more likely because people who buy convenience store taquitos tend to have fairly flexible cleanliness standards, as a group. Pardon me, Max said. I wonder if you would happen to be Derek Sambuchi. Yes, the cashier said. I would happen to be. He pointed at Rutherford. Hey, you can't smoke that thing in here. Keeping the e-cigar clenched in his teeth, Rutherford said, It's not a real cigar. Derek Sambuchi replied, And I don't really care. Rutherford pulled the cigar out of his mouth and held it in his hand, which seemed to pacify Buchi. Buchi thrust the overstuffed plastic bag of overpriced merchandise at the customer and gave him a perfunctory nod. The customer walked away with the words, "I don't really care," ringing in his ears, which was really a more honest farewell than "have a nice day" or "please come again" would have been. "You the guy who wants to talk to me about Dr. Arledge?" Buchi asked. Max replied in the affirmative. Buchi started walking to the end of the counter. As he passed the younger man, he said, "Rashid, I'm going to go have a word with this guy." "You're supposed to work the register." "Which is why you need to cover for me." "I have my own work." "So do your work while you're doing mine. You're in America now. You're going to have to learn to multitask." Scott, you dirty dog. There's no way I could get through that one. As Buchi crossed the shop to the back door, Rashid yelled, "Your break is at 10:30. "Yeah, and that's when I'll take it." Rutherford, who was following Buchi with the others, turned and looked at Rashid. Though obviously irritated by the extra work, the guy seemed grateful for a break from his coworker. The area behind the mini-mart was exactly as glamorous as Rutherford had expected. The dumpster and grease tank behind the fast food restaurant did not add to the ambience. Rutherford thought about how deeply the human lust for French fries must run, since the smell of the rancid, used fryer oil was making him hungry. "Okay," Sloane said. "Let's start with the preliminaries." Max nodded, but said nothing. Rutherford reminded himself that Buchi could not hear anything Sloane said. He put the e-cigar back in his mouth and settled in to watch Sloane and Max get to work. Max said, "Mr. Buchi, thank you for meeting with us. My name is Max Varmenhoven. You spoke with our associate on the phone. We are investigating the death of Dr. Daniel Arledge. We just want to ask a few questions, then you can get back to work." Buchi said, "Yeah, sure. Take your time. I'm in no rush to go back in there. It's a shame about the doctor." "Yes, it certainly is," Max said. Professor Sherwood approached Buchi and asked, "Would you please raise your arms?" He looked confused, but he did as he was asked. Professor Sherwood's bee wand buzzed faintly as he passed it over and around Derek Buchi's extremities. "Hey, what the hell is this?" "It's perfectly routine, I assure you," Max said. Buchi glowered, but kept his arms raised. Looking away from Max, he gave Sloane the once-over. He changed his expression to a nauseating smirk and said, "Hey, sweetheart. Aren't you going to take that helmet off so I can get a look at your face?" Sloane shook her head. Buchi went back to glowering. Professor Sherwood ran the wand over Buchi's right front pants pocket. He looked at the readout on the wand before running it over the pocket a second time. He held the wand motionless for several seconds, read the readout a final time, then smiled and winked at Derek Buchi. Buchi said, "What? There's nothing in there." "No," Sherwood said. "I don't believe there is now, but perhaps there was." "Don't worry, Mr. Buchi," Max reminded him. "Professor Sherwood is simply running an experiment. He is not an officer of the law. His findings hold no legal weight." "Yeah, well, that's good," Buchi said, "because he's wrong. That stupid doohickey of yours doesn't work." Professor Sherwood kept smiling. "Tell me," he asked, "are you allergic to bee stings?" "No," Buchi said. Professor Sherwood said, "Good," then sprayed him with a small pumper bottle of clear fluid, hitting him mostly on the chin and neck. Buchi spat and wiped his mouth with his arm. "Ugh! What the hell, old man? You looking to get that chick's cane shoved somewhere? Sherwood turned to address the rest of the team. My work here is done. I'll be in the van. As Sherwood walked around the end of the building and out of view, Buchi shouted, Yeah, that's what I thought. You better get out of here. Max said, I promise we will have a long talk with our colleague, Mr. Buchi. Mostly congratulating him, Sloane added through Max and Rutherford's earpieces. Max, please ask him about his treatment. Max asked, How long were you treated by the late Dr. Arledge? About a year. Did you find it helpful? It kept my mom off my back. She's the one who encouraged you to seek therapy? Buchi sneered. Yeah. She knows that until I get married and settled down, she's not going to get any grandchildren. And you don't do so well with the women? Max asked. Buchi's eyes darted again to Sloane. Oh, I do fine. But I haven't met one that I'd want to start a family with yet. Max nodded. The right woman can be elusive. You're telling me? God knows I've dated plenty of them, but they're all crazy, stupid, or oversensitive. From Derek Buchi's point of view, it must have looked like Sloane silently glanced at Rutherford. But Rutherford and Max heard her say, The ones he thinks are oversensitive were probably the ones who got offended when he called them crazy or stupid. Rutherford said, Yeah. Buchi misunderstood whom Rutherford was agreeing with and said, See? This guy here is cool. He knows what I'm talking about. Rutherford heard Sloane's voice say, Laughing. Max said, If you don't mind my asking, what specifically were you being treated for? That's none of your damned business, Buchi said through bared teeth. Max said, That is true, Mr. Buchi, but it is my job to ask. Of course, they knew he had been in treatment for something relating to irrational hostility, but if they hadn't known already, his attitude would have given them a helpful hint. Max continued. But the therapy was helping? Buchi shrugged. Some of it. The one-on-one stuff, yeah. I just talk. Tell the doctor about all the idiots and jackasses I know, and what it felt like to tell them off. Dr. Arledge listened and sometimes asked me how I felt when I yelled at them or how I thought they felt. And what would you say? That I felt good, and that I hoped they felt bad. Max said, Your answer suggests that you found the group therapy less helpful. Yeah, it was just stupid. See, if I've got a problem, and I'm not saying that I do, but if I do, it's that I have a low tolerance for idiots and jackasses. So putting me in a room with a bunch of idiots and jackasses is only a good idea if you want me to get used to them, and I don't want to get used to them. I want them to straighten up! Buchi's voice had risen steadily throughout the exchange. He wasn't quite shouting yet, but it seemed he might be soon. Ah, Max said, we heard that you walked out on more than one group therapy session, looking unhappy. Those freaks thought they were going to help me? Like I needed any help from them! No, he was yelling. It just shows how checked out they really were. Sloane's voice cut in. Okay. This is a good chance to segue into asking if any of the other patients might have done it. Rutherford noticed that the words were delivered faster than usual. They were pronounced at the same speed, but the gaps between them had shortened. That was something I was like, wait, how do I do that? Hi, Amanda. Hi, Jewel. Max nodded. Mr. Buchi, did any of your fellow patients have a problem with Dr. Arledge? Yeah, Buchi said, as if it were obvious. How many? Max asked. Buchi seemed to calm down and squinted at Max. I suppose 1 or 2. Enough of a problem that they might have wished him ill? I suppose it's possible. Max asked, Would you please elaborate? Which members of the group may have wished him harm? Who did you all say you worked for again? We didn't, Max said. The name of our employer is irrelevant to the question. But you're not a cop. No, I'm not. And you are getting paid? Yes, Max said wearily. All of us are. This is our job, after all. Sambuchi smiled. How much? You being paid well? That's not relevant, Mr. Sambuchi. I think it is. I think it's very relevant. I don't know where you're from, buddy, but here in America, we got what's called the free enterprise system. And if I'm helping you do a job you're getting paid for, I don't see why I shouldn't get my fair share. If you think we're going to receive a reward for finding Dr. Arledge's killer, I promise you that's not the case, Max explained. We merely draw a salary. I'll take a cut of that, Sambuchi said. I'm not picky. Sloane said, This is going south fast. Neither Max nor Rutherford needed to be told that. We are not going to pay for your information, Max said. Sambuchi stood a bit taller, leaned toward Max, and said, Well, that's just greedy. Sloane said, Rutherford, be ready to chase him. Rutherford asked, Why? Sambuchi, who couldn't hear Sloane, said, Because you're hoarding all the profit for yourselves when I'm the one who has the information you need. Sloane, who knew what question Rutherford was really asking, said, Because that's why you're here, to look mean, chase people, and get attention. Rutherford frowned, but nodded as he did it, like it or not, it was true. Over the earpiece, Professor Sherwood, who was in the van, said, I'll assist if I can. How do you know what's going on? Rutherford asked. Because I was in the therapy sessions and I know all the people involved, Sambuchi shouted. Keep up, dummy! Max tried to reason with Sambuchi. We haven't established that you have useful information, and if you do, there are ways to legally compel you to tell us. I've been listening into your audio feeds, Professor Sherwood explained. Rutherford said, You can do that? Sloane and Sambuchi, who were both talking to Rutherford about totally different things, said, Yes, we all can, and No, he can't. Max, wait, who was it? Yes, we all can, and No, I got confused on that one. Moving on. Max continued, Let me clarify. You're right, I personally cannot, but my associate, Mr. Rutherford, the man you recently referred to as Dummy, is a sworn law enforcement officer. If he has reason to believe you're knowingly obstructing justice, he can hold you in custody until the police arrive. And I do, Rutherford said. Indeed, Max agreed. When the police arrive and question you, they'll happily tell us whatever you tell them. We could have them here in a matter of minutes. I wonder if whatever our friend detected traces of in your pants pocket is still in your vehicle, on your coat, or in your bloodstream, for that matter. I also wonder if you can account for your whereabouts at the time of the murder. Sambuchi started to shout something, but clamped down on the words. He looked at Max with wild eyes, started to shout something again, stopped short again, and averted his gaze to Sloane and Rutherford. Then he cleared his throat, and took off running around the far end of the building. Rutherford sighed, but he chased Derek Sambuchi as he did it. Max's voice in his earpiece said, Chase on! Alert! Chase on! Rutherford rounded the corner of the building and saw Sambuchi running into the parking lot. Despite his head start, he was only about 30 feet away and the gap was closing fast. Rutherford was running smoothly, leaving a trail of e-cigar smoke floating in his wake. Sambuchi was large and bulky, but he was in terrible shape. Rutherford's police training and limited experience told him that men such as these were actually quite dangerous. They had the confidence of a large man, but lacked the skills, experience, or physical capacity to back it up. Doughy men are still men, and all men tend to assume that they're pretty good fighters until it is demonstrated to them that they are not. Unfortunately, physical size does give a fighter an advantage. If a large, inept fighter got lucky and managed to pin you beneath his bulk, you'd be helpless as he slowly and clumsily beat you into submission. Sam Buchi was running toward a four-door Toyota parked at the end of the lot, presumably his car. He wasn't halfway there before Rutherford caught up to him and shoved him forward, grabbing a handful of his uniform smock as he did so. He heard a clinking noise that he instantly recognized as his e-cigar hitting the pavement. It had been dislodged from his mouth the moment he hit Sam Buchi's back. He wasn't sorry to hear it go. His effort to bring Sam Buchi down was less successful than he would have liked. Sam Buchi merely lurched forward, his balance having been upset by Rutherford's shove. Rutherford kept his grip on Sam Buchi's smock, so he was yanked forward and off balance himself. The big man staggered to a stop and swung around drunkenly, trying to wrench himself free from Rutherford's grip. In his earpiece, Rutherford heard the sound of a desk chair rolling quickly across an office floor, followed by Albert's voice saying, "Okay, HQ here. Launching chase cam." Sam Buchi threw a wide, slow punch that would have connected with Rutherford's head if he had been shorter, standing several inches to the right, and not watching. As Rutherford was none of those things, he managed to grab Sam Buchi's left arm and trap it in his own right armpit. Sam Buchi was now held in place by his arm and his shirt. He twisted and spun in a bid to tear his shirt free, but he only succeeded in causing the two of them to pirouette in place. In his peripheral vision, Rutherford saw a dark shape rise over the roof of the van. He didn't tear his focus away from his assailant, but his ears told him that it was one of Albert's quadcopters. He hadn't known that the van concealed drones, but he wasn't particularly surprised to find out. It darted toward him, dropping to a height of about 4 feet as soon as it was clear of the van. Sam Buchi used his free right arm to break Rutherford's grip on his uniform, then threw another poorly aimed, low-velocity punch at Rutherford's face. Rutherford deflected it easily and was able to get a solid grip on the larger man's wrist. Rutherford had Sam Buchi pretty much immobilized, but was himself stuck in a pose any schoolchild would have immediately recognized as that of a little teapot. Sam Buchi, for his part, was struggling in place with his right arm trapped and his left arm extended as if he were being led by Rutherford in a vigorous, if inelegant, waltz. Rutherford caught another brief glimpse of the drone, which hovered unsteadily about 10 feet away, and off-the-shelf smartphone hung underneath, held by a bracket mounted beneath the drone's spherical chassis. Rutherford was distracted for a moment, but his attention was wrested back to the task at hand when he realized that Sam Buchi had managed to extend his right leg forward between Rutherford's feet. Fearing for his groin, Rutherford reflexively brought up his left leg to protect that delicate region, but this cost him leverage. The big man shoved him backward. As he fell, Rutherford released his grip on his adversary's arms in a doomed effort to catch himself. Rutherford fell and rolled onto his back at Sam Buchi's feet. Sam Buchi looked down at him with murder in his eyes. In Rutherford's ear, he heard Terry, who was also listening in from the office, say, "Okay, Professor Sherwood." Derek Sam Buchi pulled back his left leg, intending to kick Rutherford, either in the head or the ribs, whichever Rutherford left exposed. Then, cutting through all other sounds and rendering all other thoughts moot, Rutherford and Sam Buchi both heard Professor Sherwood shout, "Stop, or I'll release the bees!" Sam Buchi was confused. Either his mind couldn't comprehend what it had just heard, or it had and was choosing not to believe it. Either way, he kicked Rutherford half-heartedly and resumed running toward his car. Professor Sherwood shouted, "Stay down, Rutherford!" Then the air filled with buzzing. It grew louder Rutherford saw that one of the hatches in the side of the van had opened, and inside were what appeared to be untreated wooden slats. He couldn't make out much more detail because his vision was engulfed by a growing cloud of live bees swarming toward him. Most of the bees passed overhead with enough speed to create a noticeable Doppler effect, but some stopped and massed on Rutherford's arms. His instinct screamed at him to slap at the bees and kill as many as possible in the hopes of scaring the others off. But Professor Sherwood was shouting, "Freeze! Don't move! Stay calm, and they won't sting!" Rutherford chose to listen to Professor Sherwood, though he couldn't take his eyes off the bees crawling over the arms of his jacket. Professor Sherwood said in a quieter voice. "Sorry about this, Rutherford. Some of the scent marker must have rubbed off. He probably touched his neck, then touched you. Please remove your jacket carefully. Keep your motions as slow and deliberate as possible." Rutherford shimmied out of the jacket as slowly as he could. It certainly seemed to take an eternity to him. He set the jacket on the ground and stepped back with such rapidity he nearly bumped into someone. It was Professor Sherwood, who had accessorized his usual windbreaker and dockers ensemble with a beekeeper's hood and gloves. Sherwood handed Rutherford a spray bottle. "Please spray this on the bees. I'd do it, but I need to keep an eye on Mr. Buchi." Rutherford did as he was told, and watched as the bees abandoned his jacket and joined the rest of the hive, subduing Derek Sambuchi, who was silently experiencing a living nightmare, while Albert's quadcopter hovered nearby, capturing the moment for posterity. Rutherford turned to hand the spray bottle back to Professor Sherwood, and only then noticed that Sherwood had what looked like a small sniper rifle aimed at Sambuchi. Obviously, seeing the confusion on Rutherford's face, he said, "Relax. It's a dart gun. Epinephrine. He said he wasn't allergic, but we can't be too careful." There we go. All right. Thanks for sticking with that. Whew, I read a lot tonight. My producer's going to be like, "Why haven't you finished your book and you read all this night?" No, we don't kill the bees. The bees go back and get to live. So that's about it. That's, we did an hour. I'm happy that everybody stopped by. I'm glad people got to hear a little bit of this. Go out and get it. It's called The Authorities by Scott Meyer. I'm going to do a broadcast later on. If you go to my Facebook page, there's going to be another broadcast later on around midnight. So you can see how much more tired I'll be by then. I'll probably have one eye open. I'll be reading. But we'll do it. It'll be fun. And I hope to see you all there. Scott says, "I was actually shocked at how much of the book Luke read." I was too. I don't think I knew. I was so excited that I just got into it. But I'm glad you all listened. Oh, and the new website, yeah, that's going to be a couple extra days. Thanks for reminding me. We're doing a transfer over from one platform to another, and it said it would take a couple extra days. So I think probably by Monday, but I'll put a notice out. So thanks. I appreciate it so much. Glad to have you back again, too. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to log off, and hopefully we'll catch you next time. Have a great night. I can't do it.